The mahogany conference room of Winters and Blackwood had witnessed countless family dramas over its century-long existence, but even the oil paintings of stern-faced founders seemed to lean forward with interest that rainy Tuesday afternoon. I sat in the back corner, a deliberate choice to remain as inconspicuous as possible among the sea of relatives I barely knew. Uncle Roland dominated the room from the moment he entered, his 6'3" frame impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. His booming laugh punctuated every conversation as he moved through the gathering, clapping shoulders and kissing cheeks with the practiced charm of a politician. When our eyes met briefly, his smile never faltered, though it failed to reach his eyes. Quite the turnout for the old man, he said to no one in particular, surveying the room. Harrison always did know how to draw a crowd. Even from the grave, my grandfather, Harrison Wells, had been many things to many people. Business magnate, philanthropist, collector of rare antiques, and according to family legend, a man with secrets buried deeper than the fortune he'd amassed over his 92 years. I'd known him differently as the quiet, thoughtful man who taught me chess on Sunday afternoons and sent me handwritten letters throughout college when everyone else had switched to emails and texts. Mr. Wells left explicit instructions about the proceedings today, announced the family attorney, whose silver hair and perpetually furrowed brow gave him the appearance of someone who had seen too many families torn apart by inheritance dispute. The room quieted immediately, respect for Harrison's fortune overriding whatever personal grievances simmered beneath the surface. As Mr. Winters methodically worked through the preliminary aspects of the will, charitable donations, disposition of various properties, specific bequests of personal items, I watched Uncle Roland's expression grow increasingly smug. He'd positioned himself at the head of the table, an unspoken claim to his expected position as primary heir. After all, he'd been the only child who had followed Harrison into the family business, expanding Wells Industries into new markets, while my mother had pursued academia and my aunt had disappeared into the art world of Europe. When Mr. Winters paused to take a sip of water, Uncle Roland couldn't contain himself any longer. He leaned toward his wife and whispered loudly enough for those nearby to hear, "All mine. The business, the controlling shares, all of it. Exactly as it should be." Then, with theatrical timing that my grandfather would have appreciated, Mr. Winters set down his water glass and reached for a sealed envelope that had remained conspicuously centered on the table throughout the proceedings. "And now," he said, his voice taking on a different tone, "we come to Mr. Wells' final instructions regarding Wells Industries and his controlling interest in the company." The V envelope bore a single name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting, mine. The room fell so silent I could hear the antique clock ticking on the mantelpiece. Mr. Winters broke the seal on the envelope with deliberate care, extracting several pages of heavy stationery covered in my grandfather's meticulous handwriting. "Before I continue," Mr. Winters said, adjusting his reading glasses, "Mr. Wells requested that I play this recording." He placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed play. My grandfather's voice, still strong despite being recorded in his final weeks, filled the room. "If you're hearing this, I've finally run out of time. A condition I never suffered in life." A soft chuckle followed. "I've always believed that wealth without purpose is a burden rather than a blessing. Each of you has received what I believe will bring you true fulfillment, whether you recognize it now or not." Uncle Roland's expression had frozen, his earlier smugness calcifying into something harder as he stared at the envelope with my name, Roland. My grandfather's voice seemed to address him directly. "You've always seen Wells Industries as your birthright. You've worked tirelessly to expand it, to shape it in your image rather than mine. I recognize your ambition, but I've watched with growing concern as profit margins have taken precedence over the principles upon which I built this company." A flush crept up my uncle's neck. His wife placed a manicured hand on his arm, either in restraint or comfort. "My grandson," the recording has never expressed interest in running Wells Industries. In fact, he's deliberately chosen a different path. This, paradoxically, is precisely why I've made my decision." Mr. Winters set down the recorder and began reading from the pages. "I, Harrison Wells, being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeath my controlling interest in Wells Industries, representing 62% of outstanding shares, to my grandson. This transfer comes with certain conditions that must be met for the inheritance to be fully vested." Uncle Roland's chair scraped against the hardwood floor as he stood abruptly. "This is preposterous. The boy knows nothing about the business. He's never shown the slightest interest, Roland." Mr. Winters interrupted with the weary patience of someone who had moderated countless family disputes. "Please allow me to finish. The conditions may address your concerns. My uncle remained standing, knuckles white against the table edge, but fell silent. I sat in stunned disbelief. My grandfather had never indicated any intention of involving me in the family business. I'd pursued journalism instead, working my way up from local news to investigative reporting for a respected national publication. Our conversations had centered around books, ideas, and occasionally my latest article, Never Business Succession. Mr. Winters continued reading. The controlling interest will be held in trust for a period of 1 year, during which time my grandson must complete the following tasks. First, he must work in each of the 5 main divisions of Wells Industries for a minimum of 2 months, from entry-level positions to management observation. My cousin Eliza, Roland's daughter, snickered audibly. Second, Mr. Winters continued, unperturbed. He must locate and unlock the private vault containing my personal journals and research, which document the true history of Wells Industries and certain decisions made. Throughout its development, the room stirred with murmurs. My grandfather's penchant for record-keeping was well known, but the mention of a secret vault sent a ripple of intrigue through the assembled family. The location of this vault is known only to Mr. Winters and is secured by a series of puzzles and keys that only my grandson will be able to decipher. Based on our private conversations and shared experiences, Uncle Roland's laugh cut through the room, a harsh, dismissive sound utterly unlike his usual practiced charm. This is absurd. Harrison has essentially created a treasure hunt to determine the future of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I've dedicated 30 years of my life to this company. I've tripled its value while this boy was writing fluff pieces for magazines. Investigative journalism, I corrected quietly, finding my voice for the first time. Hardly fluff piece. Roland's eyes locked onto mine, cold calculation replacing his earlier fury. An investigation is exactly what we need. Harrison was 92. His mental state in his final years was thoroughly documented by 3 independent medical evaluations, Mr. Winters interjected, all confirming his complete mental competence. Furthermore, these arrangements were made 3 years ago, not on his deathbed. The aftermath of the will reading unfolded like a series of aftershocks. Family members clustered in tense conversations, their voices rising and falling as they processed this unexpected turn of events. Uncle Roland had retreated to a corner with his attorney, their urgent whispers punctuated by sharp gestures. Mr. Winters approached me, carrying a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. Your grandfather asked that I give you this privately, he said, placing it in my hands. It contains the first key and initial instruction. The rest, he said, you would discover along the way. The box was heavier than it appeared, its surface smooth from generations of handling. A small brass plate on the lid bore the Wells family crest, a lighthouse standing firm against crashing waves. Do you think he made the right choice? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Mr. Winters studied me for a moment, his expression softening. Harrison rarely did what was expected, but he never acted without purpose. He spoke of you often, with a pride he rarely expressed about anyone else, but I know nothing about running a corporation. I've deliberately stayed away from the family business. Perhaps that's precisely why he chose you. Fresh eyes see things differently. He glanced toward Roland, who was now making heated calls on his cell phone. Your grandfather became concerned about the company's direction in recent years. He valued profit, certainly, but never at the expense of principle. Before I could ask what principles had been compromised, my mother appeared at my side, her academics calm, a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence around us. Harrison always did have a flair for the dramatic, she said, with the fond exasperation of a daughter who had spent decades deciphering her father's intentions. But there's method in this, I promise you. Did you know? I asked. She shook her head. Not the specifics, but he asked me once if I thought you had the courage to stand against the current when necessary. I said you'd been doing exactly that with your journalism. The wooden box seemed to grow heavier in my hands. I have a career, a life I've built for myself. I can't just abandon everything for ... whatever this is. No one is asking you to abandon anything, came a new voice. Eliza, Roland's daughter, approached with the cautious air of someone crossing enemy lines. Unlike her father's barely contained fury, she exhibited a calculating curiosity. Grandfather's conditions only specify working at Wells for a year. After that, you could walk away with controlling interest and do whatever you want, including selling your shares. The implication hung in the air between us. Eliza had been groomed as Roland's heir apparent, accompanying him to board meetings since she was a teenager. If I completed the challenge only to sell my inheritance, she and Roland would be perfectly positioned to buy control. I haven't decided anything, I replied. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course not. It's a lot to process. Just know that if you need any guidance about the company, I'm happy to help. Families should stick together in times like these. As she glided away to rejoin her father, Mr. Winters murmured, "Trust was in short supply in Harrison's final years. Be mindful of that as you proceed." The gathering gradually dispersed, leaving me alone with the wooden box and a decision that would affect not just my future, but the livelihoods of thousands of Wells Industries employees. Outside, rain streaked the tall windows of the conference room, the gray afternoon matching my uncertain mood. Later that evening, in the quiet of my apartment, I finally opened the box. Inside lay a brass key unlike any I'd seen before, intricate teeth arranged in an unusual pattern, and a folded note in my grandfather's handwriting. Asterisk, the journey begins where ours did, over nights in pawns on Sunday afternoons. The board is set differently now, but the strategy remains the same. Look, 5 moves ahead. Consider all possibility, and remember that the most powerful piece often moves in ways others cannot anticipate. Asterisk, your first position awaits you in Manufacturing Division A, where we make the things that power the modern world. Ask for Sophia Martinez. She's expecting you, though she doesn't yet know why. Asterisk, trust selectively. Document thoroughly. The recorder in this box has been modified to be undetectable by standard security measures. You'll understand why this matters soon enough. Asterisk, I believe in you, even if you don't yet believe in yourself. Asterisk, Manufacturing Division. Sprawled across 30 acres of industrial land outside the city, its array of buildings a testament to the evolution of Wells Industries over generation. What had begun as a single factory producing electrical components had expanded into a complex operation manufacturing everything from precision medical devices to advanced energy storage system. I arrived early Monday morning, the brass key and journal secured in my messenger bag, uncertainty churning in my stomach. The security guard at the main gate checked my ID against a list, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Wells, like the company?" he asked, studying my face more carefully. "My grandfather was Harrison Wells," I replied, still unaccustomed to the weight that name carried in certain contexts. The guard's demeanor shifted immediately. "Of course, Mr. Wells. Ms. Martinez is expecting you in Building C. Take this visitor badge and follow the blue line." The manufacturing floor hummed with activity, a choreographed industrial ballet of workers, automated systems, and assembly lines producing components I couldn't begin to identify. Engineers in white coats consulted tablets, while technicians adjusted machinery with practiced precision. Sophia Martinez spotted me before I saw her, a woman in her early 50s with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that missed nothing. "So you're Harrison's grandson," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, her assessment frank. "He said you'd come eventually, though I expected someone in a suit, not jeans and a leather jacket." "I'm not exactly the corporate type," I admitted. Something like approval flickered across her face. "Good. We have enough of those upstairs. Follow me." She led me through the facility, explaining processes and introducing workers with a familiarity that suggested deep connection, rather than managerial distance. Many of the employees had been with Wells Industries for decades, some following parents and grandparents into the company. "Your grandfather used to walk these floors regularly," Sophia, as we entered a quieter section. "Not just for show, but to really understand the operation. That changed when your uncle took over day-to-day management. Now we get quarterly visits with photographers and press releases about hands-on leadership." The criticism was subtle, but unmistakable. I wondered how many others shared her perspective. "Harrison's note said you'd be expecting me, but wouldn't know why," I said as we reached her office. Sophia's expression grew more guarded. "He visited me about 3 years ago, said that someday his grandson might come asking questions about Project Helios, and that I should tell you everything regardless of confidentiality." She closed the office door and lowered her voice. "I thought he was being paranoid in his old age. Now I'm not so sure. The name meant nothing to me." "What's Project Helios, officially?" "An experimental energy storage system developed 15 years ago that never made it to production." She moved to a filing cabinet, unlocking it with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. "Unofficially? The reason your grandfather and uncle stopped speaking for nearly a year." She withdrew, a thick folder labeled with a project number rather than a name. Harrison kept meticulous records of everything, including things most executives would rather not document. Duplicate files stored in multiple locations. Your uncle has spent years trying to locate and destroy them all. The folder contained technical specifications, test results, and correspondence about a revolutionary battery technology that promised unprecedented energy density and longevity. But mixed among the technical documents were internal memos about safety concerns, test results showing dangerous instability under certain conditions, and finally, minutes from a board meeting where Roland had advocated for moving forward with production despite known risks. Harrison shut it down, Sophia explained, said no profit margin justified knowingly endangering customers. Roland was furious. He'd already promised major shareholder breakthrough that would transform the company's market position. I flipped through the pages, journalist instincts awakening, but that was 15 years ago. Why would my grandfather make this part of his challenge to me now? Sophia's expression darkened, because 6 months ago, Roland quietly restarted the project under a different name. He's brought in new engineers who don't know the history, compartmentalized the testing to prevent anyone seeing the complete picture, and fast-tracked development to coincide with the launch of our next-generation products. The restricted research facility occupied an unmarked building on the outskirts of the Main Wells Industries campus. Unlike the bustling manufacturing center, this place had the sterile, high-security atmosphere of a classified government installation. I arrived in the pre-dawn darkness, dressed in the maintenance uniform Sophia had provided, heart hammering against my ribs as I swiped the access card at a service entrance. The supervisor barely glanced at me, checking off a name on his clipboard and handing me a work order. Third floor needs attention first. Something about temperature fluctuations in the Eastern labs. Don't disturb the researchers. They get testy. I nodded, adopting the resigned demeanor of someone performing a routine job. The maintenance badge gave me access to service corridor, mechanical room, and the building's infrastructure. Invisible pathways running alongside the highly restricted research spaces. From a maintenance closet on the third floor, I could access the ventilation system that served the Eastern laboratories. While ostensibly checking temperature control, I positioned myself to observe the lab through ventilation grate. Teams of engineers worked with components that matched the descriptions in the Project Helios files. Though now labeled Project Prometheus, I activated my grandfather's modified recorder, capturing conversations that floated up through the ventilation system. The instability issues persist in the high-output configuration, one researcher. Frustration evident in, we've tried the modifications you've, but the heat dissipation is still problematic under sustained load. An older man in a lab coat, clearly a senior, figure dismissed her concerns with a wave. The consumer applications won't approach those output levels. We just need it stable enough to pass the standard certification tests. But the military prototype requires exactly those higher outputs. Another engineer. If we can't solve the thermal runaway problem, that's not your concern, the senior researcher interrupted sharply. Your job is to meet the specifications for the commercial version. The military adaptations happen downstream in a different division. The conversation confirmed my worst suspicions. They were deliberately creating a firewall between different aspects of development to obscure the full picture. Each team saw only their piece of the puzzle, preventing anyone from raising comprehensive safety concerns. I continued my maintenance charade through the morning, gathering fragments of information from different labs. By lunchtime, I had documented multiple conversations indicating that Project Prometheus was indeed Project Helios reborn, with the same fundamental safety issues unresolved. As I was finishing in a mechanical room, the door suddenly opened. I turned, expecting the supervisor, but instead found myself face to face with Eliza. She froze momentarily, genuine shock crossing her features before her composure returned. Well, this is certainly dedicated journalism. Or should I call it corporate espionage? I straightened, abandoning the maintenance pretense. I'd call it due diligence before taking responsibility for a company. Her eyes narrowed as she closed the door behind her. How did you get access to this facility? It's restricted to authorized personnel only. Apparently my grandfather qualified as authorized personnel, even posthumously. Something flickered across her face, calculation, perhaps, or grudging respect. You're playing a dangerous game. If security finds you here, they'll what? Arrest the majority shareholder of the company they work for? The confidence in my voice surprised even me. You're not the majority shareholder yet, she corrected. The conditions haven't been met. The year hasn't elapsed. Legally, you're just a trespasser in a secure facility. She was right, and we both knew it. My provisional status gave me few actual protections. What do you want, Eliza? Did Roland send you to intimidate me? She leaned against the door, studying me with newfound interest. My father doesn't know I'm here. I've been watching the security log, saw a maintenance badge accessing unusual areas. I came to investigate personally. Why personally? Why not alert security? Because I wanted to see what you're really after. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think this is a simple morality, play noble grandfather versus greedy son? The reality is more complicated. Enlighten me then. She hesitated, internal calculation visible in her expression. Not here. Meet me tonight, 8 p.m., at the Lockwood, private dining room in the back. Come alone or don't come at all. Before I could respond, she turned and left, leaving me to wonder whether she'd immediately report my presence or keep this encounter to herself for reasons of her own. The next division on my grandfather's list was research and development, the intellectual heart of Wells. Industries where innovations were born and refined before moving to manufacturing. Unlike my undercover approach at the Prometheus facility, this assignment came with an official introduction by Mr. Winters, who presented me to the division director as Mr. Wells, who will be observing operations as part of his orientation to the company. Dr. Lillian Chun, the R&D director, welcomed me with professional courtesy layered over visible skepticism. We've prepared an overview of current projects and arranged for you to shadow team leaders throughout the division, she explained as we walked through gleaming laboratories. Though I must admit, your grandfather's instructions were somewhat unusual. In what way? I asked. He left a sealed envelope to be opened upon your arrival. She handed me a cream-colored envelope with the Wells Industries seal. He specified that you were to have unrestricted access to all research data, including archived projects and restricted files that typically require board-level clearance. I opened the envelope, finding another of my grandfather's handwritten notes. Asterisk Lillian can be trusted, one of the few who stood with me against Roland's pressure. The answers you seek about Helios and its successors are in the archive room. Use the brass key. What you'll find will challenge everything you thought you knew about our family legacy. Asterisk. Remember, innovation without conscience is merely invention. The difference matters. Asterisk. Dr. Chun watched my reaction carefully. Harrison was my mentor, she said quietly. When Roland began pushing boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, your grandfather made contingency plans. Some of us were part of those plans. How many people are involved in this? Contingency network? Enough to matter. Not enough to leave. Harrison was selective. She led me away from the main laboratories toward a secure wing requiring biometric authentication. The archive room houses physical records of every significant project in the company's history, including those Roland believes were destroyed. The room in question resembled a bank vault more than a typical archive-reinforced walls. Climate control, and a door with both electronic and mechanical security measures. The electronic lock responded to Dr. Chun's credentials, revealing an old-fashioned keyhole where my brass key fit perfectly. I'll leave you to it, she said. Some truths are better discovered in private. Inside, meticulous organization belied the explosive nature of the content. Projects were archived chronologically, with special sections devoted to particularly significant innovations. I followed the timeline to the Helios, finding substantially more documentation than Sophia had provided, including personal journals from Harrison documenting his evolving position on the project. The entries began with enthusiasm about the breakthrough technology, followed by growing concern as military applications became apparent. But the true revelation came in entries dated shortly after Harrison's apparent moral stand against the project. April 18th, Roland believes I terminated Helios purely on ethical grounds. Better he thinks that than knows the truth. The instability isn't just a flaw, it's a fundamental characteristic of the energy density we've achieved. The technology in its current form is inherently unsafe at scale, regardless of application. Asterisk May 3rd. Defense Department representatives unofficially suggested proceeding despite known risks. Acceptable casualties in tactical deployment scenarios was the phrase used. I cannot allow Wells technology to be deployed with known fatal flaws, regardless of profit potential or government pressure. Asterisk, May 30th, Roland continues to argue for reviving the project with modifications. He doesn't understand where it refuses to acknowledge that the core technology requires a breakthrough we haven't achieved. Without it, Helios will always be a ticking bomb. Asterisk, these entries painted a more complex picture than I'd understood. Harrison's objections weren't solely ethical. The technology was fundamentally unsafe, a fact that Roland either didn't comprehend or chose to ignore in pursuit of profit and military contracts. Deeper in the archives, I found a section labeled Alternative Approaches containing research initiated secretly by Harrison after the official termination of Project Helios. A small team of trusted researchers had been working on addressing the fundamental instability issue, seeking a safer way to achieve similar energy density. Most surprisingly, these efforts had produced promising results. A different technological approach that avoided the critical flaws of Helios while potentially delivering comparable performance. Harrison had kept this research completely compartmentalized, outside normal company structures, and funded through a private foundation he controlled. Amanda Winters proved nothing like her father, where James Winters embodied old-school professional formality. His daughter arrived at our cafe meeting in ripped jeans and a vintage leather jacket, her dark hair streaked with purple highlights. At 35, she had the sharp eyes of someone who had seen behind too many corporate veils and the cautious demeanor of a person accustomed to looking over her shoulder. "You're late to the game," she said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from me. "Harrison expected you to reach me weeks ago." "I've been thorough," I replied. "I wanted to understand the technology situation before diving into the financials." She nodded approvingly. "Smart. Most people follow the money first and miss the bigger picture." She placed a small external hard drive on the table. "Everything's here encrypted, of course. The password is the date Harrison first showed you his chess collection, followed by the name of the piece you found most fascinating." The personalized security measure was classic Harrison information only I would know from our private interaction. The memory surfaced immediately. My 12th birthday, being shown his collection of antique chess sets, and my fascination with an unusual queen piece carved from jade, which he'd allowed me to hold despite its value. "What am I going to find?" I asked, pocketing the drive. Amanda glanced around the cafe before answering. "Evidence of how Roland financed certain operations outside normal corporate channels, specifically how he handled the Callaway acquisition." Dr. Chun mentioned Callaway. "What was it?" "Not what, who." "Marcus Callaway, founder of a small but innovative energy storage company that developed a promising alternative to lithium-ion batteries about 4 years ago." Her expression darkened. "They were pursuing technology that might have solved some of the same problems as Project Helios, but through a completely different approach. A competitor to Wells Industries? Potentially, yes. Though they were still in early development, Callaway was seeking investment to scale up when his company suddenly collapsed amid allegations of financial impropriety and data falsification. The journalist in me recognized the pattern. Let me guess, accusations that were never quite proven but sufficient to destroy the company's reputation and valuation." She nodded grimly. "Callaway maintained his innocence, but couldn't weather the legal costs and investor exodus. The company's assets were acquired for pennies on the dollar by a shell corporation that, if you follow enough layers of ownership, connects back to Roland personally, not Wells Industry. He engineered a corporate takedown to eliminate competition, I surmise." That's what Harrison believed. But believing and proving are different things. The financial records on that drive show unusual transfers from Roland's personal accounts to entities later linked to the smear campaign against Callaway. Harrison spent months reconstructing the paper trail. If my grandfather had evidence of corporate sabotage, why not take it to authorities? Amanda's laugh held no humor. "Because Roland insulated himself too well. The connections are circumstantial, damning in aggregate, but not individually conclusive. And the potential blowback against Wells Industries would have been devastating, affecting thousands of innocent employees. So instead, Harrison decided to orchestrate this elaborate succession plan." She stirred her untouched coffee. "Harrison's goal wasn't just to remove Roland from power, it was to fundamentally transform how Wells Industries operate. He believed the company needed leadership that understood both the technical and ethical dimensions of their work." She fixed me with an evaluating stare. "Apparently, he thought you might be that, given the right preparation." The weight of expectation felt heavier with each new revelation. "What happened to Marcus Callaway after his company collapsed?" A shadow crossed Amanda's face. "Official reports say suicide found in his garage with the car running 3 months after losing everything." Harrison never believed it was self-inflicted. The implication hung in the air between us, too serious to voice explicitly without concrete evidence. If Roland had been involved in eliminating not just a company but its founder, the stakes of my investigation had risen dramatically. "The drive contains everything Harrison gathered," Amanda "financial records, communication patterns, witness statements that never made it to official investigations. But be careful how you use it. Roland has resources and connections that make him extremely dangerous when cornered." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Her expression turned guarded. Let's just say there's a reason I don't use my father's connections or work in corporate law, despite my training. I saw too much while helping Harrison gather this information. Roland's estate sprawled across 5 manicured acres. The main house, a modernist monument of glass and stone designed by a famous architect whose work adorned museum walls. Security was omnipresent, but discreet cameras disguised as landscape lighting, guards posing as groundskeepers, a gatehouse that scanned visitors' vehicles for explosives and tracking devices. I arrived precisely on time, having taken precautions of my own. The digital recorder from Harrison was securely hidden, modified as he'd claimed to evade standard security scans. I'd also left copies of everything I'd discovered with 3 separate individuals, with instructions to release the information to specific journalists and authorities if I didn't check in within 24 hours. Roland greeted me in the soaring entryway, the perfect picture of a gracious host, despite the circumstance. "Thank you for coming," he said, extending his hand. "Whatever our differences, we're still family. Is that why you had me followed after the will reading?" I asked, accepting his handshake but establishing immediately that pleasantries wouldn't distract me. His smile didn't waver. Precautionary observation? Nothing more. Harrison's arrangements were unexpected and concerning. I needed to understand what he was planning through you. Planning? He's dead, Roland. And yet his influence continues, doesn't it? That's what we need to discuss. He gestured toward a sitting room where a bar had been set up with premium spirits. "Can I offer you a drink?" Before I could respond, the front door opened again, and Eliza strode in with purposeful confidence. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, though her timing suggested perfect calculation rather than tardiness. Roland's expression flickered with momentary anger before resetting to hospitality. "I wasn't expecting you, daughter. I invited her," I explained. "I thought having another perspective would be valuable, especially from someone who understands both the company and the family dynamics." A silent communication passed between father and daughter. Challenge, assessment, adaptation. Roland's recovery was impressively quick, of course. The more family involved in this discussion, the better. Over drinks and then dinner in a formal dining room overlooking illuminated gardens, Roland presented his version of events, a narrative carefully constructed to acknowledge certain facts I'd likely discovered while reframing their interpretation. Harrison, in his telling, had been a visionary founder whose brilliance had eventually been compromised by age and growing paranoia. "Your grandfather became fixated on hypothetical risks rather than actual innovations," Roland swirling expensive bourbon in a crystal glass. "Project Helios was his greatest creation. He couldn't bear to see it develop to its full potential, especially when that development had to evolve beyond his original vision. The instability issues weren't hypothetical," I countered. "The technical documentation shows fundamental safety concerns that remain unresolved in Prometheus." Roland's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've been quite thorough in your investigations, but what you've seen are isolated test results without the context of subsequent modifications. We've addressed the core issues, have you?" Eliza interjected, surprising both Roland and me. "The latest simulations from R&D still show critical failures under certain conditions that exist in the real world, not just laboratory." Roland shot her a warning look. "Those edge cases represent scenarios that would never occur in normal operation, like thermal runaway in lithium batteries. Also supposedly impossible until phones started catching fire," she replied. There was an edge to her voice I hadn't heard before, less deference, more challenge. I seized the opening. "Let's talk about Marcus Calloway." The name landed like a stone dropped in still water, ripples of tension spreading visibly across Roland's features before he controlled them. An unfortunate business casualty. His company made claims it couldn't support, and the market responded accordingly. With help from strategic leaks and planted stories, I added, followed by acquisition of his patents through shell companies linked to your personal accounts, not Wells Industries. Roland set down his glass carefully. "You've been speaking with Amanda Winter. She's always had an axe to grind with me, professional jealousy, because Harrison trusted me with operations while keeping her at arm's length on legal matters. The financial records tell their own story, as do the payments to someone named Mercer, before and after Calloway's convenient suicide." At the mention of Mercer, Roland's composure cracked momentarily, a flicker of something like fear quickly masked by indignation. "You're venturing into dangerous territory with these insinuations. Mercer is a security consultant who works with many corporations, including occasionally Wells Industries. Any suggestion of impropriety is not just false, but potentially libelous." The Wells archives occupied the basement level of the company's original headquarters, a historic structure now dwarfed by the modern corporate campus that had grown around it. Unlike the high-security, high-tech facilities I'd visited previously, this space had a forgotten quality, with fluorescent lighting that buzzed intermittently and the musty scent of aging paper. I arrived early, scoping the environment for potential threats or surveillance. The archives were ostensibly open to employees researching company history, but at this hour, the space was deserted except for a lone archivist who barely glanced up from her computer as I signed the visitor log. "Section C7 has been prepared for your review," she said without preamble. "Your colleague is already waiting." I followed her directions through rows of tall shelving units containing bound reports, photographs, and memorabilia from Wells Industries' 90-year history. In the designated section, a figure sat at a study table partially concealed by stacks of file boxes. As I approached, the person looked up and I froze in recognition. It was James Winters, the family attorney who had read Harrison's will. The last person I'd expected to be secretly meeting me. "You look surprised," he observed, his formal demeanor unchanged despite the clandestine nature of our meeting. "I apologize for the theatrics, but certain conversations cannot happen in official settings." "You're the anonymous texter?" I asked, taking a seat across from him. "Why the secrecy?" "You're the executor of Harrison's estate." "Precisely why I must be careful. My official role requires neutrality." He folded his hands on the table. But Harrison was more than a client. He was a friend of 40 years. What Roland is doing threatens everything he built. Then why not stop it? "You have authority as executor." Winters shook his head. "My authority extends to executing Harrison's wishes as legally documented. It doesn't give me power to intervene in company operations unless they directly contravene the will's provisions." He lowered his voice further. "But I can provide context that might help you navigate what's coming." "What do you mean?" "You've been discovering pieces of the puzzle, Helios, Prometheus, Callaway. But there's a bigger picture involving international interests." He slid a thin file across the table. "These are notes from meetings Harrison had with government officials in his final year meeting. Roland doesn't know about." The file contains summaries of discussions with representatives from defense and intelligence agencies, expressing concern about certain Wells technologies potentially being accessible to foreign entities through corporate partnerships Roland had been cultivating. "Roland has been negotiating with investors from several countries that our government considers problematic," Winters. "On the surface, they're standard business deals, manufacturing partnerships, market access agreements. But intelligence agencies identified concerning patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "Foreign entities specifically interested in divisions working on dual-use technologies, innovations with both civilian and military applications, Prometheus being the most significant." The implications were disturbing. "Are you suggesting Roland is knowingly selling sensitive technology to foreign powers?" "Not selling. That would be too obvious and clearly illegal. The arrangements are more sophisticated. Joint ventures structured to provide legitimate access to research while maintaining plausible deniability about knowledge transfer." Winters' expression was grave. "Harrison discovered this and began working with certain government contacts to address it quietly." "Is that why he created this elaborate inheritance challenge? To buy time for some kind of intervention?" Winters nodded slowly. "Partly. He needed someone he trusted to take control eventually, but he also needed to ensure proper evidence was gathered and safeguards implemented before Roland realized what was happening." "What about Edward Jenkins and International?" "Roland specifically warned me about his agendas." "Edward walks a complicated line. Officially, he manages global partnerships for Wells Industries. Unofficially, he maintains relationships with intelligence services interested in tracking technology transfer to certain nations." Winters straightened his tired, nervous habit I'd noticed during the will reading. "Roland suspects Edward's dual loyalties but hasn't been able to prove them." This explained Roland's cryptic warning and added another layer of complexity to an already Byzantine situation. "So, Edward is essentially a government asset inside Wells Industries." "Asset is too formal a term. Let's say he's a concerned citizen who shares information when appropriate." Harrison trusted him. Roland does not. "I processed this new information, connecting it with previous discoveries. The alternative technology Harrison's team developed, the safer version of Helios. Was that part of his strategy to counter Roland's foreign partnerships?" Winters looked genuinely surprised. "You found that already?" "Harrison thought it would take you months to put those pieces together." He nodded appreciatively. Yes, developing a superior alternative was Harrison's technological countermove. If successfully deployed, it would render Prometheus obsolete while keeping the truly revolutionary aspects under proper oversight. Dawn broke over the city as we finalized our preparations for the board meeting. I'd managed perhaps 2 hours of restless sleep, my dreams haunted by Harrison's warnings and Blake's threats. Thomas had spent the night analyzing Oracle's systems, ensuring Blake hadn't already found a back door. The finance division occupied the uppermost floors of Wells Tower, its glass-walled executive suite offering panoramic views of the city's skyline. Unlike the manufacturing facilities or research lab, this was the realm of spreadsheets and market projections, the place where innovation was translated in shareholder value and strategic investments. Diana Chun, Chief Financial Officer, greeted me with the crisp efficiency of someone who measured time in billable increments. "Harrison said you'd make it this far," she remarked, leading me to her corner office. "Roland bet against you, literally. He has a standing wager with several board members that you'd abandon the challenge within 2 months. Glad to disappoint him," I replied, taking in the minimalist decor of her workspace. No family photos or personal touches, just awards for financial excellence and a single bonsai tree meticulously maintained on a side table. Disappointment is the least of Roland's concerns now. She closed the door and activated a privacy screen that turned the glass walls opaque. He's been making increasingly erratic financial moves in the past weeks, accelerating foreign partnerships, reallocating research budgets, and most concerning, moving significant company assets into structures that would be difficult to untangle should control of Wells Industries change hands. Is that legal? Legal, but borderline. He's exploiting his current authority while remaining just within technical compliance with corporate bylaws. She opened a secure terminal on her desk. What he doesn't know is that Harrison implemented a monitoring protocol before his death. Any transaction above certain thresholds or involving specific entities automatically generates documentation that's preserved. Outside normal financial system, the screen displayed a complex web of transactions, money flowing through subsidiary, shell companies, and international partnerships in patterns that obscured their ultimate destinations. "This is financial camouflage," Diana explained, "designed to hide the true purpose of these movements. But when analyzed properly, a clear pattern emerges." She applied a filtering algorithm, and the chaotic web resolved into distinct channels, each ultimately connecting to entities associated with Project Prometheus and the foreign manufacturing partnerships Edward had mentioned. Roland is effectively creating a shadow version of Prometheus, one that could continue development even if the official project were shut down or control of Wells Industries changed hands. Her precise voice carried unmistakable disapproval. "It's a corporate contingency plan that prioritizes the technology's development over the company's integrity or his own safety," I added, thinking of the documented flaws in the Prometheus design. "He's willing to risk catastrophic failure to maintain control of the technology," Diana nodded. "The financial evidence supports that conclusion. The accelerated timeline, the corners being cut, the resources diverted from safety protocols all point to prioritizing deployment over validation." She retrieved a small safe from beneath her desk, opening it with a complex combination. "Harrison left this in my keeping, with instructions to provide it only when you reach this stage of your journey." Inside was a flash drive and a Onal key, this one ornate and antique-looking. Unlike the modern security keys I'd encountered previously, the flash drive contains complete financial documentation that would withstand legal scrutiny, evidence of Roland's actions that goes beyond what I've shown you. "The key is for the vault, which I believe you now have the means to locate." I showed her the compass-like device from Edward. Apparently this provides coordinates when properly aligned. That sounds like Harrison always, preferring elegant puzzles to straightforward solutions. She returned to her terminal, inputting a series of commands. "Before you leave, there's one more thing you should see." The screen displayed what appeared to be an invitation to an exclusive event scheduled for the following week, a demonstration of next-generation energy storage technology for selected investors and government representatives at a remote Wells Industries testing facility. Roland has accelerated the Prometheus timeline dramatically. This demonstration wasn't scheduled for another 3 months according to the official project plan. Her expression was troubled. "He's planning to showcase a prototype at full capacity, something the safety teams have explicitly against. Why rush it now?" Because your progress through Harrison's challenge has exceeded his expectation. He's trying to create a fait accompli once the technology is demonstrated and partnerships are finalized. Unwinding those commitments becomes nearly impossible, regardless of who ultimately controls Wells' industry. The mountain road wound through increasingly remote terrain, cell service fading to intermittent patches. We climbed higher into densely forested hills. Eliza drove with the focused precision I'd come to associate with the Roland side of the family, handling the sharp turns with practiced ease while I navigated using the coordinates from Harrison's. "Did you know about this property?" I asked, breaking a silence that had stretched for miles. Harrison mentioned a cabin once, somewhere he went to think when facing difficult decisions, but he never shared its location. She glanced at the compass device in my hands. "My father has been looking for Harrison's private records for years. He assumed they'd be in a bank vault or lawyer's office, somewhere conventional. Harrison was rarely conventional," I observed. "The whole inheritance challenge demonstrates that." Eliza's expression softened slightly. "When I was young, Harrison would create elaborate treasure hunts for my birthday presents. Multiple clues, puzzles within puzzles. My father always thought it was frivolous. He gave practical gifts with straightforward presentations. The reminder of Harrison as a person, a grandfather, who created birthday puzzles, not just a corporate strategist, humanized the increasingly complex situation. Whatever awaited in the vault had been arranged by a man who understood both the seriousness of the situation and the personal dimensions of family legacy. The coordinates led us finally to an unmarked gravel drive nearly invisible from the main road. A simple electronic gate blocked the entrance, featuring only a keypad with no identifying signage. "Any ideas on the code?" Eliza asked, stopping before the gate. I studied the keypad, remembering Harrison's consistent pattern of personalizing his security measures. "Let's try his chess reference again." The date he showed me his collection. The gate swung open silently, revealing a winding drive that continued upward through thick pines. After another mile, we reached a clearing containing not the rustic cabin I'd expected, but a modern structure of glass and stone that seemed to emerge organically from the mountainside. "This is..." Eliza trailed off, clearly surprised by the sophisticated architect. Not what either of us expected. The front door featured another keypad alongside a more traditional lock. The ornate key from Diana fit perfectly, while the keypad accepted the same code as the gate. Inside, the space was minimalist but comfortable, clearly designed as a retreat rather than a primary residence, with an open floor plan offering stunning views of the surrounding wilderness. "Harrison's thinking place," Eliza murmured, taking in the wall of books. The simple but elegant furnishings, and most notably, a chess table by the window, with a game apparently abandoned mid-play. I moved to examine the chess position, recognizing it immediately as a famous historical game, Kasparov versus Deep Blue, the momentous match where artificial intelligence first defeated a human chess champion. Harrison had arranged the pieces precisely at the critical juncture where the computer made its unexpected, decisive move. "Man versus machine," I commented. "Appropriate given the Prometheus situation." Eliza had moved to a painting on the far wall, a lighthouse standing firm against a violent storm, similar to the Wells family crest but rendered in a more impressionistic style. "This looks significant," she said, running her fingers along the frame. The painting swung forward on hidden hinges, revealing a sophisticated safe with both electronic and mechanical security measures. The final application of Harrison's compass device was immediately apparent. Specific orientations were required to align with markers on the safe's dial, creating a multi-layered authentication process that would be virtually impossible to crack without the exact instrument. After several minutes of careful alignment following the compass's changing coordinates, the safe clicked open, revealing its contents: several hard drives, folders of documents, and most surprisingly, a small video camera set up to activate automatically when the safe was opened. Harrison's face appeared on the camera's flip-out screen, gaunt but determined, clearly recorded in his final weeks. "If you're watching this," he began, "you've successfully navigated the path I laid out. I hope the journey has provided not just information, but understanding of why these measures were necessary." Eliza and I exchanged glances as Harrison's posthumous message continued. The hard drives contained complete documentation of Project Helios, its fundamental flaws, and most importantly, the viable alternative technology my private research team has developed. This alternative achieves comparable energy density without the catastrophic instability issues of the original design. He paused, his expression growing more somber. "But the documents in the red folder address a more troubling matter. evidence that Roland has been knowingly proceeding with Prometheus, despite being personally briefed on the catastrophic failure risks. His signature appears on risk assessments that explicitly outline the potential for massive energy release under certain conditions. Assessments he later ordered buried. The demonstration facility, a remote Wells Industries testing site located in an isolated industrial zone far from residential areas, loomed before us as dawn broke. The choice of location now seemed ominously prescient, given what we'd learned about Prometheus's potential for catastrophic failure. Security at the entrance was heightened, but, as Winters had promised, our arrival was expected. A senior guard escorted us directly to a monitoring room where Winters, Diana, and Edward were already assembled, their expressions grave as they reviewed real-time feeds from the demonstration area. "The checkmate protocol is in progress," Winters explained without preamble. "Regulatory authorities have been notified with preliminary evidence, and an emergency injunction is being processed, but legal machinery moves slowly. The demonstration could begin before official intervention arrives." On the monitors, technical teams were making final preparations around a device that resembled a large metallic cylinder connected to sophisticated monitoring equipment. Roland moved among them, projecting confidence as he directed adjustments and consulted with lead engineers. "That's the scaled-up prototype," Diana explained, 3 times larger than any previously tested version, designed to demonstrate commercial viability to the investors and military observers arriving within the hour. "Where's the safety team?" Eliza asked, scanning the various camera feeds. Edward's expression darkened. "Relegated to remote monitoring from headquarters." Roland cited space limitations, but effectively removed anyone who might raise objections during the demonstration. I placed Harrison's hard drives and the folders of evidence on the conference table. "We have everything needed to stop this comprehensive documentation of the flaws, signed risk assessments that Roland later buried. And most importantly, the complete alternative technology that achieves the same goal safely. The alternative is key," Diana, quickly reviewing the technical specifications. "It provides a face-saving way for the board to halt Prometheus without destroying the company's market position or abandoning the technological breakthrough entirely." Winters was already making calls, coordinating with regulatory officials and arranging for digital transmission of key documents. "The injunction is proceeding, but we're still looking at hours, not minutes. We need to delay the demonstration directly." "I'll confront Roland," I decided. With Eliza backing the technical assessment and the evidence from Harrison's vault, we might convince enough of the demonstration team to stand down. "It's a significant risk," Edward cautioned. "Roland has invested everything in this, his pride, his legacy, his vision of the future. People in that position rarely respond rationally to last-minute intervention." "We don't need him to be rational," Eliza interjected. "We just need to create enough doubt among the technical team that they refuse to proceed without additional safety verification." As we formulated our approach, the monitoring screen showed new arrivals, sleek corporate vehicles and government cars, delivering the invited observers for the demonstration. Among them, I recognized several foreign business leaders associated with the partnerships Edward had identified as concerning from a national security perspective. "The audience is assembling," Diana noted. Once Roland begins his presentation, interrupting becomes exponentially more difficult without creating a very public confrontation. "Then we intercept him before he goes public," I said. "Eliza and I will approach directly, while you 3 ensure the evidence reaches the board members who are present. We need to create a pincer movement pressure from multiple directions simultaneously." As Eliza and I prepared to enter the demonstration area, Winters handed me a final document, a formal letter signed by Harrison before his death, explicitly revoking authorization for Prometheus development based on identified safety concerns, with his signature witnessed and notarized. "Harrison prepared for this exact scenario," Winters explained. "This letter has legal force even posthumously, as it relates to technology developed under his patents and leadership." Armed with this final piece of leverage, we moved toward the demonstration floor, where Roland was now greeting arriving dignitaries with practiced charm. He froze momentarily upon seeing us enter together, quickly masking his surprise with a corporate smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Family support on this momentous day. How touching," he said as we approached, his voice pitched to appear welcoming while conveying clear warning. "Though this is a closed demonstration, highly sensitive." "We're not here as observers," I replied, keeping my voice equally measured. "We're here to prevent a potentially catastrophic error." Roland's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "Any concerns should have been raised through proper channels, not brought to a demonstration already in progress." They were raised, Eliza interjected, holding up the documentation we'd brought. Repeatedly by multiple safety teams in reports you personally acknowledged and then buried. A flicker of genuine alarm crossed Roland's features as he recognized the documents Harrison's originals, not copies that could be dismissed as fabricated. He glanced around, noting the attention our conversation was beginning to attract from both technical staff and arriving observers. "This isn't the venue for technical debates," he hit, attempting to guide us toward a side door. "We can discuss your concerns privately after the demonstration." "There can't be a demonstration," I insisted, producing Harrison's formal letter. "This technology has been officially deemed unsafe by its original creator, and an alternative exists that achieves the same goals without the catastrophic risk factors." Roland's composure began to crack. Harrison was ill, not thinking clearly. "The modifications address all theoretical concerns." "They don't," Eliza cut in, her voice carrying enough technical authority to make nearby engineers pause. "The fundamental instability exists at the molecular level. Scaling up the prototype only magnifies the risk exponentially." As we spoke, I noticed Winters, Diana, and Edward had entered the demonstration area from different points, strategically engaging with board members and key technical personnel, sharing documents and speaking with urgent intensity. The ripple effect was becoming visible: whispered consultations, concerned glances toward the prototype, engineers stepping away from their stations to review the materials being circulated. Roland noticed it too, his expression darkening as he realized the coordinated nature of the intervention. "This is corporate sabotage," he said, abandoning pretense of civility. "Years of work, millions in investment, partnerships worth billions, all being undermined by baseless fear-mongering." "Not baseless," I countered, opening one of the technical files to show catastrophic failure simulations based on the exact parameters of today's demonstration. "Your own engineers predicted these outcomes before you removed them from the project." A senior engineer had approached during this exchange, his expression troubled as he glanced between the documentation and the prototype. "Mr. Reed, these failure projections, they align with concerns my team raised last month before being reassigned. Theoretical edge cases," Roland dismissed. "The modifications don't address the core instability," Eliza finished. "And you know it, Dad. You've known it since Harrison first shut down Helios." The demonstration area had grown quieter, the confrontation now drawing attention from across the room. Board members were conferring urgently with Diana and Winters, while Edward was engaged with several government representatives, showing them documentation with national security implications. Roland surveyed the room, visibly calculating his options as his carefully orchestrated moment unraveled. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "The demonstration proceeds as planned. I am still CEO of Wells Industries, and this project has board approval. Conditional approval based on safety verification that was never completed." Diana called from across the room, now standing with 3 board members who were nodding in agreement. The senior engineer who had joined our conversation turned to his team. "Power down the prototype. We need to review these safety projections before proceeding." For a moment it seemed we had succeeded. Technical staff began the shutdown procedure. Observers were murmuring among themselves, and several board members were openly consulting the evidence we'd provided. Then Roland made his final, desperate move. "This is corporate terrorism," he announced loudly, addressing the entire room. "A coordinated attack on American innovation by interests that would rather see this technology controlled by foreign powers." He pointed accusingly at Edward. "Ask him about his clandestine meetings with government agencies. Ask my nephew who's funding his intervention. Ask yourselves who benefits if Wells Industries loses its competitive advantage." The bizarre accusations might have seemed the ravings of a desperate man, but Roland delivered them with such conviction that they created momentary confusion, exactly enough to allow him to move toward the prototype control station. "The demonstration continues," he declared, reaching for the main activations. The senior engineer moved to intercept him. "Sir, we've initiated shutdown. Reactivating now could create exactly the instability these documents warn about." "Step aside," Roland ordered. "I built this company into what it is today. I won't let it be destroyed by cowardice and manipulation." In that moment, I recognized what Edward had warned about: a man who had invested everything in a particular outcome, unable to process information that contradicted his vision. Roland wasn't just defending a technology or his corporate position, he was defending his entire identity as Harrison's true successor and technological visionary. What happened next occurred with stunning rapidity. Roland pushed past the protesting, overriding the shutdown sequence with his executive authorization. Alarms immediately began to sound as the prototype's monitoring systems detected irregular energy signatures in the core components. Molecular destabilization in the primary containment, a technician called out, voice rising with alarm. Exactly as the simulation predicted. Evacuate immediately, the senior engineer, activating emergency protocols that sent red warning lights flashing throughout the facility. Full facility evacuation. This is not a drill. The whispers at Roland's will reading. All mine, followed by the revelation of my name on that sealed envelope, set in motion events that transformed not just my life, but the future of Wells Industries and potentially, given the technologies involved, aspects of global energy infrastructure. 6 months have passed since the failed demonstration and the implementation of Harrison's contingency plans. The company has undergone significant restructuring, with transparency and ethical innovation now explicitly enshrined in its core principle. The board approved a novel leadership structure I proposed, one that distributes authority more equitably and incorporates robust ethical oversight for all major technological development. Roland resigned rather than face potential criminal charge, accepting a generous but carefully structured retirement package that removed him from operational influence while preserving his dignity. In private conversations during the transition, I glimpsed moments of the man Harrison must have once seen potential in brilliant, visionary, but ultimately undone by ambition that eclipsed judgment. Eliza has emerged as a surprisingly strong ally, her intimate knowledge of company operations complementing my outsider perspective. She now leads the research and development, instituting new protocols that prevent the dangerous compartmentalization that enabled Prometheus to progress despite fundamental flaws. Her relationship with her father remains complicated, a mixture of disappointment, understanding, and cautious reconciliation, conducted mainly through occasional dinners where business is strictly off-limits. The alternative technology Harrison developed in secret has passed rigorous safety testing and entered initial production phases. Its applications extend far beyond what even he might have, not just energy storage for consumer electronics and vehicles, but potentially grid-level solutions that could accelerate the transition to renewable energy sources. The military applications remain under appropriate oversight, with Edward continuing his careful balancing act between corporate and national interests. As for me, the reluctant heir who once believed journalism was my only calling, I've found unexpected fulfillment in my new role, not as a traditional CEO, but as what I've come to call a legacy guardian, focusing on long-term vision and ethical direction while empowering those with specialized expertise to handle day-to-day operations. I still write, though now mostly about the intersection of technology, ethics, and corporate responsibility, using Wells Industries' transformation as a case study in how businesses can evolve toward more conscientious innovation. Harrison's elaborate inheritance challenge proved to be far more than a test of my capabilities or determination. It was a carefully designed intervention, a way to guide Wells Industries through a perilous transition that could have ended in disaster without his posthumous orchestration. The chess metaphor he employed throughout was apt not just in the strategic positioning of allies and evidence, but in the fundamental lesson that in both chess and corporate leadership, the best players think many moves ahead and consider the entire board, not just their own pieces. The vault in the mountains remains a private retreat where major decisions are contemplated away from corporate pressures. I've maintained the chess table by the window, though I've reset the pieces to starting positions, a reminder that each new challenge begins with possibility rather than predetermined outcome. Sometimes, in the quiet of that space, I imagine Harrison sitting across from me, making the opening move in a new game. "Your turn," he would say with that slight smile that always suggested he saw more moves ahead than anyone else in the room. And in a way, it is my turn now to build upon his legacy while creating something distinctively my own. The inheritance was never just about wealth or control. It was about responsibility to employees whose livelihoods depend on wise stewardship, to customers who trust our products, to society that lives with the consequences of technological innovation. Harrison understood this fundamental truth and ensured through his elaborate posthumous strategy that Wells Industries would be guided by it long after he was gone. As for Uncle Roland's confident whisper at the will reading, "All mine," I've come to see it not as villainous greed, but as a fundamental misunderstanding of what truly matters in a legacy. Some inheritances can't be possessed. They can only be honored through actions that extend beyond self-interest to serve a greater purpose. That, perhaps, is the final lesson Harrison intended all along.